Hello and welcome to this DCS AH-64D reference aid video. The full refresher course for this aircraft will be released only after all of its systems have been implemented. However, I am making this video series to assist anyone who is new or returning to this aircraft get up to speed quickly. It has been about 6 months since my first video covering this aircraft, and during that time there has been a handful of changes and additions made that I wanted to touch on. Do take note that this video is being made in September of 2022, so depending on when you're watching it, some of the information covered may be obsolete. Also, as with all my videos, this will not be an in-depth tutorial, but rather a fairly fast-paced review of the systems covered. Feel free to skip around using the timestamps in the description if you're here for one topic in particular. Alright, this time around I'm not going to cover the full startup procedure as there's been nothing added. There's just been a couple of steps that have been removed or changed. Previously, when we would come in to set the low radar warning, we would also have to turn on the radar altimeter. It's already on by default. On the TSD page, we would turn on the Doppler. It is also on by default, so these steps of course can be skipped. A recent change, when we would go to the ASE page to arm the chaff and then come in to enable the RLWR voice, the chaff can no longer be armed with weight on wheels. You can, however, use your ground override and then arm it, and then once you're airborne, just turn off your ground override. But anytime you land, you need to keep that in mind when you take off, if you're rearming, to rearm your chaff once you go back up on the ASE page. So those are the three things that have been removed from the startup. The thing that has been changed is the way the manual frequencies work for the radio. Previously, you'd come down, go to comms, manual, decide which one of these stations you wanted to change, and if you changed this one, it would change just that one. And if you wanted to change the one over here, you would have to hit the swap button. So right now it's 126 and 127. You'd hit swap to put the 127 over here and then change it here. That would stay 126. That is no longer the way it functions. The way it functions now is when you make a change to one of these frequencies, it will push this frequency to the standby side, deleting whatever is on the standby, and the new frequency that you entered will be the active one. So in this case, I have 126.5 and 127.5. If I wanted to keep the 127.5 and change this to 125, I would have to switch the 127.5 over here. So whatever frequency you want to keep needs to be over here, and the one you're replacing needs to be over here. So coming down, like I said, I want to keep the 127.5, so I would need to switch it to be over here. Now that I've entered 125, it has pushed my 127 over here, 0.5, and it got rid of the 126. If I enter the 126 now, so the 125 is here, the 127 is here. If I enter 126, enter, it has now deleted my 127, pushed the 125 from this side over here, and put the 126. So just keep that in mind. Whatever station you want to keep needs to be over here, and the one you're replacing over here. Alright, I also wanted to touch on the TSD again a little bit because I kind of glossed over it in my initial video. I still prefer to use the satellite map when I'm in the front seat for the added detail layers, but when I'm in here in the back flying, I actually use the digital terrain map now. By default, everything is going to be grayed out, so you need to choose a color band. I use the aircraft so that it takes my altitude. Everything within about 50 feet of that will be yellow. Everything above that will be red. Everything below that will be gray. So if I zoom in down here a little bit, this is extremely useful not only for terrain avoidance when you're flying at night or in inclement weather, but it's extremely useful for terrain masking. So go to pan mode, come in again. We can see I'm down here at this airfield, and then between me and the target area, just by sitting here on the ground, I can see that everything is going to be within 50 feet or below that between me and them. So there's nothing for me to hide behind if there's a SAM out there that's locking me out. But over here we have a bunch of red hills. That means that these are going to be at least 50 feet or higher above what I am right now. So I could plot a waypoint, set it out over here somewhere, follow this ridge line up, put myself behind these hills. I could easily be flying at 20-30 feet and still have terrain between me and the target area. Go ahead and come off pan, freeze. I also wanted to discuss real quick just a little tip, I guess you could call it. A lot of missions I'd noticed that they don't set up a waypoint at your FARP or at the airfield, so you have to make one yourself. And this is extremely useful when you're at a FARP with assigned helipads or something, or a player built fob that has little individual parking spaces, because when you come back to land you don't remember which one you took off from. An easy way to deal with that is just before you take off, go to your point, hit store, make sure that your type is waypoint, hit now, and you've just created a waypoint exactly where you're sitting. And all you have to do now is go into the route management and add it as a point to your current flight plan. So I only have one waypoint out here at the target, so that one I just created is now waypoint 2. I can come into route, go to add waypoint 02. Waypoint 02, enter, add it to the end of my flight plan here, go to direct, waypoint 1. When I hit that now, it'll waypoint me back to exactly where I'm sitting. All right, now I'm gonna get down near the target range and I'll cut back and go over the position hold mode. So for the attitude, 0 to 5 knots is gonna be your position hold. 6 to 40 is velocity, and 40 plus is going to be your attitude. The most important thing to remember is you need to try to get your aircraft trimmed near the neutral point for your hover, so that way the system's not fighting you. And you're not going to want to use the airspeed on the left over here. You want to use the line with the circle. You want to get it in tight around your cross before you set up your trim and engage the system. Right now in the current build, there does seem to be a couple of issues with the altitude hold mode, where it begins to slinky you up and down after you've been sitting there for a little bit, and can eventually end up slamming you into the deck. So just keep that in mind. Until they get it sorted, it might be better to use manual altitude control as opposed to the altitude hold mode. Of course, as you're getting it there, just trim, and then you can make fine adjustments. Again, you're just trying to pull that center circle in, trim it, and then you can activate the attitude and the altitude hold if you wish. But again, like I said, it seems to be causing more issues currently than it should be. It takes a few seconds for it to settle out and get into a decent hover. As you can see up here, it's still saying that we're going 10 knots, but according to the bob up, we're not really moving that much at all. And that's pretty much all it is to get into a hover. If the altitude hold was working correctly, you could just enable it and it would hold the altitude there. And then if you wanted to change altitude, you could just kick it off, make very small adjustments to the collective to go up or down, so that way the other control surfaces don't have to try to struggle to keep up, and you're good to go. That's all it really is. Next, I'm going to cover the changes they made to George. They now have it color coded to where whenever he finds targets, they'll show as blue or red. Depending on the difficulty of the mission, he might actually have to identify them, and he has the chance of misidentifying them. So you might want to still visually ID your targets. So all you have to do for that is hit the George command up long to zoom in. You can zoom in 3 times and see what he's seeing. So those are the targets out there that he's looking at, and of course you can always zoom in to get a better view. And as you'll note, the targets down there are blue or friendly. That's the ones he's marked as friendly. You can hit the aft long to zoom back out. If you don't want to see friendly targets, you can press left long and it will filter the list to just have hostile targets. If you hit right long, it'll filter it back to show all targets that he currently sees. Alrighty, I also wanted to go over a few things in the front seat. By default, when you hop up here on your iHAD, you're going to have the TADs overlaid on top of it, which is extremely useful if it's nighttime and you've got your gunner helmet sight set as your acquisition source, because then all you have to do is slave and you can look around and the TADs will follow it. The problem is during the daytime with the double image, it can get a bit distracting. To get rid of that, you simply need to use your sight selector, go to HMD, While you're on this one, go to the brightness rocker, hit it down about 8 to 10 times, and then when you use the sight selector to go back to the TADs, that overlay is gone. If you should want it back, just simply switch back to the HMD, and then you can hit the asterisk down here to reset it. When you go back to the TADs, you got it back. All right, another thing I wanted to quickly discuss is down here, the CAQ. So you can grab really quickly targets like these ones that are right here. These were put by the map by default because we have blue forces out here that were detecting them, so they were auto-populated. And I already have a waypoint on this one, but if I wanted to grab one of these really quickly, you simply just move your cursor over it, hook it, and then now you'll notice down here that it is set as our acquisition source. And then after that, all you have to do is slave your TADs to it, and then of course zoom in, and there you go. You've got your target locked up. All right, I went ahead and landed so I could show two more things. The first one being, if you're using SRS and you're always hot micing on your intercom, that's because the ICS panel by default is set to voice activation. Just right click it to put it in push to talk. The other thing is the smoke rockets that we currently have, or at least the ones that are labeled smoke. They're actually training rockets. So the M274, both in the standalone pod and in the HE mix pod, are training rockets. The ones that we're going to need for smoke marking are the M259, which is the white Willie Pete, and then the M264, which is the red Willie Pete. All right, that's all I got today. Happy hunting out there. And as always, thank you for your time and attention.